Maulana Muhammad Ali's English translation and commentary of the Quran is no doubt a scholarly work, and it aptly had a huge influence on teaching Islam in the academic realm. Not too long ago, I had a telephone conference with the past president of ISNA, the Islamic Society of North America, and he mentioned to me that when he used to teach Islamic studies at Howard University, he too used Maulana Muhammad Ali's Quran translation. And so too do universities and colleges all around the country. Our next presenter, Professor Fatima Rahman, has personal experience in utilizing Maulana Muhammad Ali's literary works as teaching tools in the classroom. Professor Rahman is Assistant Professor of Politics and the Chair of Islamic World Studies at Lake Forest College. She's also a frequent speaker on issues concerning Islam and politics, democracy in the Muslim world, and international terrorism. We are so fortunate to have with us today Professor Fatima Rahman to speak about the role of Maulana Muhammad Ali's Quran translation and his literature in the field of academics. Professor Rahman.
No, I think this is fine. Can you guys see my head? You can see me? See, okay. The tool? Oh, the site? Oh, I thought you were asking if I needed something to pop me up. Oh, okay. It's like, okay. In the name of God, the most beneficent, the most merciful. Really, the honor today is mine to be here and to be able to give you all a brief account of how our organization's books and literary works are used in the college or university classroom. I would kind of want to just start off by saying that it's my belief that in this super kind of fast-paced, super wired age that we live in which our phones are essentially glued to our hands, that the most difficult job today is to be able to sit down and to listen attentively, right? For me being up here, it's a piece of cake. I'm engaging, I'm speaking, I'm doing something active, but for you all to be just sitting there and listening, it's really, I think, a great achievement, and so I really do want to thank you all for being here and taking the time to listen to me and the other speakers. So as you all are very well aware, the theme of the symposium this year is reviving the true spirit of the Islamic faith. And to me, what that means essentially is restoring the practice of the faith back to its authentic roots. So roots that advocate for religious tolerance, for coexistence, for peaceful worship, and doing good to others. And really, I believe, and I think that this is something that's really, most everybody here would agree, that this is a core objective of the Lahore Ahmadiyya Islamic Society. This is really what drives us. This is what drives the people who organize this event. This is what drives people like me. And I think most of us here, many of us, are members of this organization, and we're really fortunate to be involved in this mission. Now, one of the primary tools that we use in achieving this mission of trying to restore the faith back to its true practice should be no surprise to you. It's our literary works. So our organization is known for publishing books, articles, Quranic commentary, op-eds, and things of that nature about the philosophy of the religion and the basic tenets of the religion. And our works have been written by the great scholars, and of course today we're celebrating one of them, Maulana Muhammad Ali, but other scholars as well. Of course, our founder, right there pictured, Mirza Ghulam Ahmad, as well as contemporary scholars, some sitting right now in this room, others watching across the country and across the world, who are continuing to write original works and are involved in translations to also achieve this objective. And the common theme in all of our scholarship, whether it's been produced by the great scholars of the past, like Maulana Muhammad Ali, or by our contemporary writers, is that all of the scholarship is essentially showing how our faith, based on its scripture and based on the practices of our founding prophet, Muhammad, wholeheartedly rejects bigotry, rejects violence, and rejects intolerance. And so today my focus, really, as I mentioned, is going to be on how the works of one of these great scholars, Maulana Muhammad Ali, is utilized in the college classroom. Now, it shouldn't come as much of a surprise that Maulana Muhammad Ali's literary works are a popular choice for professors of Islamic studies. So Islamic studies professors across campuses and universities throughout the United States are utilizing his books for their classes. It's actually one of the most popular books that is used for Islamic studies, religion type of classes. But I'm not an Islamic studies scholar. I'm definitely not trained in Islamic studies by any means. I'm a trained political scientist. And in my classes, in my political science classes, what I'm finding is that his works are equally useful. And this really says, this in and of itself says a lot, right? Because what we're seeing is that his books are being used in religion classes, right, the humanities side of things, and they're also being used on the social science side of things, so in classes on political science, etc. Now, most of the courses that I teach personally deal with the intersection of Islam and politics. And most of my courses are dealing with this intersection of Islam and politics, both somewhat in the historical context, but also in the contemporary context. And when I was looking for books and texts and readings to use in my courses, I had a lot to choose from. You would be surprised how much has been written on Islam and politics. There's a plethora of work written by both Eastern scholars of Muslim backgrounds, but also a lot of scholarship that's been written by people of Middle Eastern heritage and more kind of Muslim heritage as well. And I'd say that all in all, I've probably spent 4 or 5 months just looking and reviewing at books to figure out which ones I want to use in my courses. And because of kind of the specific subject area, Islam and politics, that I teach, for me, really, I had to find textbooks or readings that dealt with issues such as the Islamic concept of the state, the Islamic concept of a political leader, Islam's understanding of the legal system, of punishments, Islam's understanding of warfare. So these were kind of the things that I was really looking out for. And as I looked and reviewed through the plethora of works that have been written out there, for me, the choice was clear. It really was. The literary works of Maulana Muhammad Ali really stood out, and I knew that these were going to be the primary books that I was going to use in most, if not all, of my classes. So I've been teaching my own courses, designing my own courses for about the past 6 years. And the 2 primary books that I'm using in most all of those classes are the Islamic Caliphate, which is that blue one right there, the Religion of Islam as well. And both of these, of course, are written by Maulana Muhammad Ali. And for like a primary text, I use selections from the Holy Quran, the translation and commentary by Maulana Muhammad Ali. So this is really kind of what I'm dealing with in the classroom. When I was choosing his books, his literary works, there were basically 3 core features that really stood out in his works compared to all the rest of the scholars' works that I had looked at. The first was his research. it's really based on credible and authentic sources, and you'd be surprised that despite the fact that there's been so much written on these topics, very few really have that high level caliber research. I thought the sources that he used were very sound, and he does a very good job of citing everything. And what I've also found is that he really does guard against bias in his books. Now, obviously, everyone has a little bit of a bias, right? Whenever we're doing anything in our life, we have a little bit of bias, a little bit of preconceived ideas and attitudes. But to a very, very great deal, there is a very strong sense of objectivity in his works. So from an academic perspective, that is golden, and that's something that really stood out. Second was that the content of his books is very comprehensive and complete. And that goes back to what I just said about how humanities courses are using his text and the social sciences are using his text. And he has this great ability to present these very complex ideas in a very, very accessible manner, in a very accessible fashion. And so that's why when you have really young, I mean, some of my students are as young as 16 and 17, super advanced, they get to college somehow, and even they can very easily understand the text. So, so his works are very, very accessible. And then third, and this was obviously very critical for the type of classes that I teach because they're so topical, was that his works are incredibly relevant. They're relevant. He's dealing with some of the most salient political topics today in books, that were written literally like over 80 years ago. So the foresight that he had to be able to, write about these issues that would be such compelling issues to discuss 80, 90 years after he wrote them, I think is really incredible. My students tend to be very, very shocked when they learn how old the books are and when they were actually published, because the content speaks so well to what's going on today. And to illustrate that, I want to give you a couple of examples of some of the topics that my students are concerned about and how Maulana Muhammad Ali discusses and deals with these topics in his books. So the first one, probably no surprise to anybody here, is the Islamic State, or the concept of a caliphate, something that's very concerning to students of political science. And in the early Caliphate, that was that blue book that you saw up there, Maulana Muhammad Ali, he presents this beautiful illustration of the earliest Islamic states. So the earliest Islamic states, meaning the states that basically succeeded the Prophet. So after the Prophet died, there were the four, what we call the righteous caliphates, Abu Bakr, Umar, Osman, and Ali. And he beautifully illustrates what society looked like at that time. And he presents this very open and inclusive way in which the rulers of that time ruled. They were humble servants of the people. They were there because the people wanted them to be in power. And one of the things that I know my students find really interesting that Maulana Muhammad Ali so clearly lays out is that during the administrations of the first four caliphs, he had appointed to very notable positions many religious minorities. So Christians and Jews that were living in the Islamic states had some of the most prestigious official governmental postings. And I find in my classrooms that there's this absolute shock at the contrast of what those open and inclusive societies look like then compared to the horror that the Islamic State, ISIS today, is trying to create in the Middle East, these days. The second subject matter that's of great concern to these students is this concept of jihad. And I know Dr. Malik did a great job of presenting Maulana Muhammad Ali's kind of explanation of it. And I think he did a great job of kind of interpreting it in his own way. But what I found is the way that Maulana Muhammad Ali presents this in the religion of Islam is very, very compelling. He categorizes jihad into two types. And of course, this first categorization was actually crafted by the founder of our organization, Mirza Ghulam Ahmad, but Maulana Muhammad Ali has done a very beautiful job of, recapturing it in some way in his books. So what he does is he compares the greater jihad to the lesser jihad, or go ahead, the next one, because that's not the greater jihad. That is the greater jihad. The pictures were reversed a little bit. So he presents the greater, what's called the spiritual jihad, which all the Muslims right now in this room are engaged in, which is trying to better themselves, trying to develop themselves and become better human beings, trying to get rid of your bad habits, and trying to kind of get rid of your sinful nature and trying to be a better person. That's really the greater spiritual jihad that most Muslims are concerned with. And that's what the Quran really talks about. And he compares that to what he calls the lesser jihad, which is the defensive jihad, as Dr. Malik so well explained. And this is the idea that in very certain particular conditions, Muslims are permitted to take up arms to defend themselves. But as Maulana Muhammad Ali explains, there are very strict conditions. Number one, the Muslim community must be facing an existential threat. So they're being persecuted, and they're not only being just persecuted, but they're basically being persecuted in a way in which they may no longer cease to exist as a community. And second, they have to be physically attacked, so the persecution has to be some type of a physical violence that they're experiencing. And then third, all other means of resolving the issue, of alleviating the persecution has failed. So diplomacy has failed, negotiations have failed, right? So all of these conditions have to be met in order for a Muslim community to take up arms. And it can be argued that in today's environment, in the modern age, these conditions of a defensive jihad may not even be met. It's a little bit contentious and debatable, but it's definitely an argument that's made. And so I've taken these surveys of what students, some of their preconceived notions about Islam, and when these students come in, they basically think that jihad means holy war, and that's probably not too surprising. I think that's kind of the general idea that a lot of people have, and they're just really, really shocked and surprised to find that in looking at the Quran and looking at the early historical evidence from the Prophet's time and the early Caliphs, that this is simply not substantiated. And what I really like is how Maulana Muhammad Ali does a really nice job of historically tracing how this concept of jihad has kind of changed over time. So how the initial meaning, which was just this idea of a spiritual jihad, how it's taken on this other meaning over time and how that's kind of come about. And so what that does is it allows students to kind of find a compelling reason to kind of understand, like, okay, this is why what they're seeing, what they think is jihad right now in modern day, like why that is. So I personally really like that part of the book. Now, I've been kind of yapping up here for a bit now, and I want to just kind of conclude with saying that I think really the best evidence of the success of Maulana Muhammad Ali's work in the classroom can really be captured by the comments of students themselves. And these are comments that students provide in anonymous evaluations for the younger people here, and for anybody here who's had schooling. You do these evals at the end. You evaluate your course, you evaluate your professor. And they're all done anonymously. And so what I thought is I would share some of those comments with you to kind of give you a sense of how well these books are actually doing, in the courses that these students are taking. So let's take a look at a few of these comments. So here's one of them. These are from courses that I just taught this last academic year. So the course is very interesting. The topic is on hand with today's society and issues. That it would be beneficial for this course to be offered as a GEC, a general education curriculum class, which all students would have to take. Students or everyone should have some knowledge on Islam. It's not taught or talked about enough. And other students' comments. The course covered the state and society of Islam. It also touched on current topics such as ISIS and other terrorist-related activities in Islamic states. The class was interesting and well taught. Another comment, loved the class. The class gave me a different perspective on a number of issues, as it also challenged my understanding of specific concepts. I have a better way of understanding, I have a way better understanding of the religion. You know, a millennial wrote that. I have a way better understanding of the religion and why it's so misrepresented in society today. I'm very happy that I took this class. I was very interested and have no regrets for taking it. I feel that people should be more informed about this religion to avoid an oppression of innocent people who are just trying to live out their lives in the way they prefer to. The course challenged my outlook on life and my perspective on different issues and always pushed me into working harder, into understanding what I believed in and why I believed in it. And I think, is that the last one? Yeah, so that's the last one. So just to kind of finally conclude, there's this famous saying that an academic or a professor's success is not due to him or her, but really it's due to the scholars that preceded him or her. And I find this to be very true for myself. For me, my academic understanding of Islam and topics such as Islam and politics has really come from the scholars and the writers, both past and present, that are associated and affiliated with the Lahore Ahmadiyya Islamic Society. And really, it's these writers and scholars that I'm very grateful to. And I'm so pleased that our organization is continuing this effort. We have great contemporary writers who are involved in writing original works to this day, and also involved in translation of some of the great classics of our organization. And so I really do feel very fortunate, because they're the ones really who make it possible for me to do what I do in the classroom. And so I want to again thank you all for being so attentive and listening to me, and using your energy to just sit here and kind of take everything that I was saying in. Just want to end by saying, may God bless you all. Thank you.